My name is Drew Cronin. I'm from the North Carolina Zoo. I am very loosely, maybe in the loosest sense, tied to pangolins, but I'm just going to be here to facilitate the discussion today. I'm just going to start it off just getting right into it, pass it over to Denton to get us started.
Cool. Good morning, everyone. My name is Denton Joachim. I'm from WCP. I'm the Integrated Technology Manager. I'm just going to quickly talk to you a little bit about the pangolin trends that we have been seeing over the last couple of years, and also a little bit about what WCP is all about. So just a quick introduction. WCP supports the Department of National Parks and Wildlife. We support intelligence and investigation units across the country in and around national parks. So on the map here, all these red dots are, we call them IIUs, and we actually just help these guys with the investigations and intelligence gathering. So these are the units that actually confiscate the pangolins within the operations. And as WCP, we have trained them to handle the pangolins with as much care as possible, which you'll see later why that's important. So just to orientate you around Zambia, the white doesn't seem to come up quite nicely, but the areas that we're going to focus on are the northwestern province, the northern province, the southern region here, the western region, and these eastern regions. So the WCP Rehabilitation Center was actually born out of necessity, as no one else was rehabilitating them, and we were receiving all of these animals from the illegal wildlife trade. So we set it up and started taking these pangolins in, treating them medically, and this actually led to and evolved into post-release monitoring, where we released them. So all the data that we collect from the investigations, as well as from the rehabs, actually has helped drive behavioral change research within the various communities that we are now doing. So to look at some trends, this is information from 2018 through to 2022. We received 670 pangolins, 308 of them alive, 50 dead, and 240 skins. So between 2018 and 2019, we saw a 97% increase of live pangolins, but there was a nice steady decline between 2020 and 2022, as you can see by the table at the bottom there. The similar trend is obviously can be mirrored with the trade in scales. So just looking at the information in a map, you've got massive hotspots in and around Lusaka, in the northwestern region here of Sulawesi, and then also in the northern parts here and a little bit in the easterns. So just to break it down by year, as you can see here, the high numbers, you're looking at about 5, but again, you're looking at around the borders, around massive urban areas where there's accessibility and money. This one is for 2021. The values have increased a little bit more. 2022, this looks worse than it is, in the sense of if you look at the legend values there, they have decreased dramatically. So that's the decrease that we've seen. And then this is just between 2020 and 2022. Again, massive amounts of confiscations happening in and around the southern region and the northwestern northern region. So looking at these trends, the primary seizure locations are in and around urban areas where there seems to be a lot more money and accessibility to pangolin products. We have seen a large local market within Zambia for pangolin and pangolin products, for mainly domestic consumption, but also including traditional Chinese medicine. As you saw on the maps, border areas also have a high trade, where potentially these are transits into Central and Eastern Africa, as they don't keep the pangolins for a long period of time within Zambia. It seems to be a transit route. And then obviously looking at the source population of the pangolins, these areas of, like, for example, the northwest and northern regions, that's where you tend to find a lot of the white-bellied tree pangolins. And then, so a lot of these rural areas in Zambia show a lot of live pangolins being confiscated versus pangolin products more in the urban areas. So just to close the loop on what we are doing with this. So all the operations and courtroom monitoring data that we do receive is looking obviously at the illegal wildlife trade, looking at those trends. Then in the rehab and the rehabilitation center, as well as the post-release, all that information and that data then also helps us drive the data analysis and the mapping side of things to visualize the information of what's actually happening on the ground, looking at points of interest, or areas of interest, should I say, which has actually then led us to design and implement behavioral changes programs into these specific areas to try and effectively change people's mindsets. Based on the success of these programs, we then analyze and reflect and adjust those programs to then try close the loop, so that when it comes to the monitoring and the operations side, we want to see a decline in products and that kind of stuff. So thank you very much. I will hand it over to Tswalu.
Hi, everyone. Thanks all for coming, and thanks, Denton, for that. A little bit of the stuff I'm going to be talking about today is slightly different than what seems to be the typical problem when it comes to pangolins. So there is a lot of focus on the trade at the moment, and rightfully so, because it's a demanding issue at the moment. So the thing that I've been investigating for my PhD is the Temminck's pangolin, which is in the southern and eastern parts of Africa, and looking particularly at the potential impacts of climate change. So there was a whole bunch of authors that wrote a really beautiful pangolin book in 2019, full of information, and there's only one sentence in this entire book with hundreds of authors, one sentence that mentions the potential impacts of climate change. So in 2015, I packed up my life, moved to Tswalu Kalahari Reserve in the Northern Cape province of South Africa, and decided to work with pangolins and try and investigate whether or not climate change might impact these animals. Oh, good. I'll show you a really cool video. Many people say they've never seen a pangolin, and that's bad enough, but how many of you have seen a pangolin under a thermal camera? It's pretty impressive stuff, if it will play. But basically, there's so much literature that says that pangolins are really poorly insulated, but nobody's ever tested that. We haven't tested it either, so that's not where this talk is going. But I just wanted to show this really cool video to show how those scales are not emitting as much heat as we would think if they were poorly insulated. Those scales are holding in a bit of heat. So those red spots you're seeing, that's where most of the heat is coming out. So whether they're vasoconstricting under the scales or not, we don't know. Any of the vets that want to come yell at me and tell me my physiology knowledge is wrong, please do come talk to me later. But this was really intriguing for us. So we really wanted to know how these animals are thermoregulating, what they're eating, and if that changes throughout the year, how does it affect their physiology? How does it affect their activity? And then how is future predictions in the area going to impact that diet, activity, and body temperature patterns? Oops. Don't want that again. Somebody help me. Oh, there we go. So this is just showing a bit of the predictions. I'm sure most of you in this room already know this, but large parts of Africa are getting hotter and drier, particularly those southern, southwestern areas where we are interested in. So we really wanted to know what these predictions mean for things like pangolins. And if I show you, I think that was the previous slide. So what was on this slide at some stage was a map of the pangolin distribution. which, like I said, is southern and eastern Africa, but that very, very far southwestern region where you can see these browner areas. That's the area that we're particularly interested in. So it's been identified as a climate change hotspot. And what we are predicting is that pangolins in those areas are most likely to be impacted, or the impacts in those areas are most likely to be very profound. So we'll be expecting range contractions in those areas. So we wanted to work with pangolins in those areas to understand how they cope in the environment now, so that we can make better predictions about that range in the future, whether we're going to see pangolins in those areas in the future or not. And then just to jump very briefly into some of the data we had, before I go to that one, we were talking earlier about the diet of pangolins. They're incredibly fussy animals and certainly won't just eat what you give them. And in an environment like Tswalu, where we are based, there's over 50 species of ant and termite available to these animals, but they're only targeting 3 of those species. So they're incredibly fussy. And we can go on about what the potential reasons are for that, but that's a conversation for another day. But that fussiness means that they are very reluctant to change their diet when conditions change, which is not exactly good for their survival. So through my PhD research, what we found was that during winter, when resources started to decline, as they do in many environments, pangolins did switch their diet, but we wanted to know whether that switch was going to enable them to survive throughout the winter, or whether that's going to just cause further issues. So they went from predominantly an ant diet to a lot of termites. They were starting eating a lot of termites throughout that winter. I also managed to measure the energy content and water content of that prey, and that's not a reason for them to switch, because the termites they were switching to provide so little energy to them anyway. So we wanted to further understand how on earth they survive these periods of low food availability and low energy intake. And what we saw that during those winters, pangolins switched their activity. They're predominantly nocturnal animals, but during the winter, when food resources started to decline, they switched to predominantly diurnal activity. And for us, that's great, because all of a sudden we can go out and we can see pangolins during the daytime and take amazing photographs. But we wanted to know physiologically how that's impacting these animals. And it's got context beyond just the whole climate change story. It's got context for when we are releasing and rehabbing pangolins, what time of the day is more suitable to do this. And so to show you some of the set for a wild mammal. So on the x-axis, you've got the time of the day across 2 different days, and then you've got your body temperature on the y-axis. The body temperature is generally low for what's considered for a mammal, but that's according to the ecology, it makes sense. There are other animals that have similar ecology that also have low body temperature, so that's not of concern here. But what we wanted to show is that green line, that's the typical summer body temperature pattern. So fairly stable, not too much going on. They've got enough food, they're happy, they're healthy, they can maintain their constant body temperatures because they have that food. They also get their water from their food, so they don't necessarily actively seek water. They will drink when there's water available, but they don't necessarily go out looking for water. I've seen one pangolin drink once in 8 years. So not saying they don't do it more often, but that's what I've seen. But that means if they struggle with food, they're also going to struggle with water. And so that summer shows beautifully that they were able to regulate their body temperatures. But what happens in winter is you start seeing massive changes. So throughout the day, you start seeing a gradual decline in body temperature. And that's just saying they don't have the energy to maintain those body temperatures at a constant level. And then what happens when they come out of the burrow, they're exposed to solar radiation. Look at that intense spike that's happening over there. If that was you or me, as pathetic humans, we'd be laying in hospital and crying about it. These mammals are clearly doing this all the time in winter, whether it's intentional or not to save energy, or that's another whole physiological conversation the vets can come yell at me about later. But that cannot be sustainable for a mammal to reach those high levels. When it reaches a peak, it happened to coincide with sunset during this period. So body temperature could decline again, and then they found a burrow, went back in, they were safe again. Following day, you see the same thing. Body temperature declines, they come out of the burrow, body temperature spikes. The maximum spike that I saw in the space of 1 hour was 8 degrees Celsius. That's crazy for a mammal, what's considered a larger mammal. So if it was a tiny rodent, that's a totally normal thing for rodents. For for smaller mammals, but pangolins are not considered small mammals, so this shouldn't be happening. And the challenge with increasing temperatures, daytime temperatures with climate change, if they are switching their daytime activity, this is just going to get worse and worse and worse. And if they come out earlier during the day, they're prolonging that exposure to solar radiation. So it just gets worse and worse. Then I wanted to show you a comparison between what we call the wet year and a dry year. Rainfall wasn't that different between the 2 years, but it was towards the end of an extended drought period. We had a 7-year drought period, and this was kind of reaching towards the end. And the wet year, you can see again, some fluctuation during that winter period. This is the same day for the same pangolin, but 2 years apart. And you see during that wetter year, body temperature fairly stable, a little bit of fluctuation as we would expect. But then during that dry year, again, 4.5 degree fluctuation. Crazy. So that was all related to their activity, their food availability, all of those things. So what we're trying to say is, in the face of climate change, it's not looking great. If insect availability continues to decline, as we have seen, biodiversity as well as abundance, if that continues to happen, we're going to see this more and more often. So seeing pangolins out during the daytime is not a good thing for pangolins. And again, when we're talking about when we're releasing pangolins, probably not a good idea to do it during the daytime because of these responses. What we've seen subsequent to this, we didn't monitor everything as intensely as we did during my PhD time. Towards the end of that drought period, we did have several pangolins dying, which probably suggests that these maximums kind of crossed that threshold and just they couldn't survive that. But then the opposite side of our hypothesis was, if there's no food available, they become diurnal in winter. That meant if we had a really good rainfall year, surely the opposite should be true. They should stay nocturnal throughout the winter. We had in 2020 and 2021 really good rainfalls. I mean, we got our annual average overnight. So lots of rain, really productive environment. And we were now waiting to see if pangolins were going to be nocturnal throughout that winter. And they were. So if they have enough food available, they can withstand those cold nighttime temperatures and they can carry on as usual. But when we start seeing pangolins coming out during the daytime, it's alarm bells. And so the project that we've been working on subsequent to my work was, what does it mean if we lose pangolins from this ecosystem? Other than, I mean, I'm preaching to the converted here. I think all of us in this room understand the aesthetic value as well as the biodiversity aspect to maintaining intact ecosystems with all of its role players. But we've yet to quantify that role in the ecosystem. So the context for that is that if pangolins are poached from the wild and rehab doesn't work out, and court systems are like, okay, what kind of punishment do we give to a guy that's poached a pangolin? Where do we place it on the scale? We'd like to quantify what that impact is of removing pangolins from the wild and hopefully improve that whole process. So there's my student Daniel in the middle of the night following around pangolins. So he's looking at things like soil turnover, nutrient cycling, all kinds of things, very exciting. And then, oh, there's the map. There's the pangolin distribution. That's where Tswalu is, down right at the bottom. But the project for next year that we're going to be starting is to try and redefine that southern limit of the pangolin distribution currently, to try and understand exactly why that southern distribution ends where it does. Is it a food availability thing? Is it a climate thing? So we want to redefine that, as well as just on a more micro level, what kind of habitats they use, what makes them tick, how land degradation affects pangolin distribution on a smaller scale. So there's some exciting work going on. If any of you are budding pangolin conservationists and would like to do ecological research, please come talk to me. It's very exciting. If you want to pack up your life and move to the Kalahari too, that's also pretty cool. That's it.
Ja, dit daar. Ja. Okay, waar is die klikkertjie? Do you guys have the clicker? Someone? Thank you. Just quickly, my name is Petronel Nieuwouldt. We're actually well known for the work on rhinos. So eventually when the opportunity arises or people ask us to to help with the pangolins, we said yes. But I'm sure we don't know what we said yes for. Wendy? So just, let me just find this. If this clicker is a clicker, we plugged in. Doesn't look like it. Huh? Oh, so. Okay, excellent. Okay. It's very complex. We found that it's more complex than we thought, actually. So what Wendy is saying is so interesting. So what we found now is when we walk, how we walk, when join up for the research, then the rehab after this, please. Please, Wendy, I'm that person. So we found when they're very mistreated in the illegal trade. So what we saw is actually heartbreaking. Curvy came in. She was in a bag of cement and and tie around her tail. Then they put them in baskets. Then they keep them in old toilets, and it is just ridiculous. So at that stage, they're in specific conditions that I will do and discuss now with you. It is extremely time consuming. We sometimes walk up to 8 hours a day to 9 hours. And that I'll talk to you guys a little bit about that as well. Please think about the legal side of things. And the other thing is the veterinarian that we work with is of utmost importance for us because not all of them are trained to work with pangolins, and especially pangolins that are coming out of the trade. It's just a small video. I hope it's playing now. Nee. Okay, let's go. There.
What we found with pangolins as well in the rehabilitation stages is definitely hypoglycemia, hypothermia, dehydration, shock, stress. So if I think about it, as we treat with intravenous fluids, definitely for the dehydration. A lot of this is to do with fluid therapy. And then in this fluid is a 5% dextrose solution. So if we then think about hypothermia, it's cold, they're cold. So there we need heat pads. We roomed it with aircon and that type of thing just to keep them warm. And then if we think about everything else, they do need food. So when you get to a stage where this animal is completely compromised, you have to act fast. Please warm the animal up. Please use the correct things to warm the animal up. Please give the correct fluids and enough fluids. Please know what you're doing in tubing this animal with fluids per os. And we call it tube because you put the tube down the mouth and down the esophagus careful not to go into the lungs. So all this is so important, but it's so extremely stressful. Please don't get to that stage. This is when they're completely compromised. Record keeping is of utmost importance in pangolins. We want to get them to a weight. We want to know if they're picking up weight, if they're losing weight, because these animals are so secretive. We need to know all these things that's going on in rehab so that we can put this pangolin back into its natural habitat, the way they've been before they've been taken out. This is for rehabilitation of pangolins. It's not release or anything else. The role is plain and simple rehabilitation. The diets are just too complex. Energy in, energy out. Oh, the metabolisms are very fast. So as fast as they walk and try and get away or try and find food, they burn energy. So you have to find that equilibrium, that perfect spot where they do pick up but do not lose too much. So captivity is not the answer for pangolins. They need to be in the veld.
So just quickly, if I look at this, first thing first, we get an animal that's completely compromised. I'll go through this quick. Stress is a big problem. I don't think anyone must underestimate what stress does to these animals. Shock, dehydration, hypothermia, hyperglycemia, starvation is another level. We've been talking about this. They do not. If you tube them, that's also not good. So internal, external parasites, and then behavior. We need to check behavior. So measure to manage. Keep on taking records. Keep on doing these things. Keep on taking blood samples. But do remember, then it's already too late for a lot of them. Because what you might find in any way in taking these health assessments and these things, it's already too late. Treating stress, they go into this ball, or they run away. We sometimes think they run away and then just go and lie down. And then we work out it's basically two things. Sometimes they just want to run away, go lie down. But the lie down is not necessarily the hiding from us. It's also trying to heat up. So this is quite a big indicator for your walkers that they know. Are they hiding because it's another animal in the area, or they hear something? Or are they down because basically they're too cold to walk? The metabolism is too fast. So we found that that's actually something that we all need to think about it a lot. So shock and dehydration, you can see that very clearly. If you pick them up, even if they come out of the trade, they are already weak. They pale, they cold. So all these things you need to start treating very, very fast and try and get them then to the veld again. Hypothermia, and this is, thank you for the slide again, Wendy, because what we saw, even now, at one stage we were walking them when they wake up, and then they walk in the veld during daytime, and then we bring them back late afternoon. That was winter time. Now it changed. Now we're up 4 o'clock in the morning. Then I want to sleep at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning. And then we start walking when they wake up again at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock until 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. So the people that you have working with these animals must know these animals and must have a specific personality. They can't be OCD or ADHD. They lose the pangolins all the time. It's true. So we found, and I would talk to Wendy more about it, we're on the radio a lot of the time. Then I said, guys, what is the temperature at the moment? Then they say, no, it's about 18. Okay, no, they can't walk. Okay, wait. About 23, right. Pangies must go, and then it's pangy time on Careful Wild. So it's quite interesting at that stage because then everyone move around the pangolins to make sure that they can get where they need to be. And I know a lot of people pick the pangolins up and then put them on nests. It doesn't work because they want specific things to eat. So today they will eat ants and drop-tail ants and sugar ants, and tomorrow they decide it's carpenter ants, and then they decide it's not enough ants. So this is intense, and I want to stress this that the rehabs needs to really work with researchers, ecologists, and all these. So vigilant monitoring. I'll get to a slide now where it's interesting. If we start walking them. We weigh their defecation as well. Then we will get the starting weight and the end weight. And you will walk for 8 hours and they will pick up only 30 grams. You want to cry at that stage. I'm not sure if you want to cry because of 30 grams or you want to cry because they pick up. You're always in this. So the metabolism and the output of energy is massive. It is massive. So they're always in captivity, almost in a state of chronic stress. So there we go. That's Violet. So you see, she's from the Kalahari. So now there's some rehabs, not necessarily always in the area where these animals come out of that trade. They're so used to their smells, the area where they've been, what they hear, and so on, and where they started in the morning, where they den. Now you take them out of there, take them to a new area to be rehab. I'm not sure if we're doing the correct thing there. So I think much more research, we must do a lot of more research. Looking at this, look at the starting weight and the ending weight. So sometimes this is, if you put now the ambient temperature on top of this, it's extremely important. We had 2 very, very cold days now at Careful Wild. We could not even take the pangolins out. It was too cold. We had temperatures of 8 degrees. But now they haven't eaten in 2 days. They have no extra fat. They have no reserves. So this is your problem where you're sitting in. So I'm taking my hat off to a lot of people doing the rehabs and anyway eventually get them to be released. Tubing, I'm not going to go into this too much, but if you see excessive tubing may lead to throat and tongue sores as well. You don't want to get there. They actually need to eat themselves. Different things also at play there that I actually need to mention as well is when are you tubing with what as well? Is starved, mildly starved, or mostly dehydrated? Where's your animal? Don't just treat. Just see where you are and how you can correct it with the least invasion. Look at how they come out of the trays. I couldn't, something happened and I, by mistake, put a rhino photo over one of the other pangolin photos. So if you see there on the top, trying to open the ball and injure the animal on its head, you know, and then feet injuries under the scales, all sorts of injuries, and it doesn't look like a lot in the beginning. But if you pick them up, it carries on and eventually dermatitis, and they actually die of septic shock. So these things is playing a big role for us. Then endo and ectoparasites, this is all captivity. When they're in the veld and when they look after themselves, they're dirty. They roll in rhino defecation. They're full of mud. There's lice on them, mites on them. We know. Then they're on us again, and so we carry on. But if they get into captivity and they're compromised, then all these things start to play an immense important role in treating, because the ecto and endoparasites can really cause trouble and can lead to death. So if you look at, I know this is a terrible slide over there, but I wanted you to see something. The babesia is like a tick-borne disease, and eventually they die of that. So if you don't treat there, they will actually die. So be mindful of all these things that are happening because of the chronic stress of keeping these animals in a captive situation. It's not the place for them to be. The hand rearing of orphans, I love the word pango pup. I want to get a dog and I want to call him pango pup because I think it's the sweetest name. And this is a whole new discussion. So anyone interested, we can talk about this a little bit. Rehab, the housing is a specialized area. I do know that what we found now is if we take them out in the morning, we do not come back. We let them sleep in the veld. Wherever they go and rest or nest or den, then I just let the people stay there. And little nonsense Tulip, what she will do, she will walk for 2 hours and then she will sleep for half an hour. But that's all to do with energy. So she's preserving energy. And it's colder, and it's sometimes hotter during the hot time of day as well. So don't think this is an easy task. It's a task for something specific, someone specifically that's very interested and very passionate for this. So they drink water normally in the veld, pools and so on, and we offer them water. So just quickly, this is quite interesting. The diet as well. So like I say, today they will eat specific areas, other days they will eat in other areas, but we always try and start them where they stopped so that they know the area and that they can find where they were, because otherwise they start just running like, hey, let's go. You know, they have to find out where they are. I think they have radars and like, hey, zoom in, whoop, okay, there we are. I kid you not, these things are ridiculous. They very interesting. They challenge you on every single level. and it's just because I think a magical animal that we still need to learn a lot of. And Just a quick video. I don't want to go over my time here. When I do this, you just go and faint because you're so happy. Look at that. So these animals, if you see under the scales as well, we try not keep them too clean. Interesting. Because they almost need that bacteria and so on. So if you also, in some stages, take samples of the nasal excretion and so on, you found either good bacteria or bad bacteria. And then if you find bad ones, you start treating. You're in a negative. You're in for a ride. Just have a look how they drink water. Look here. I don't know. I think a lot of you guys don't know this, but if I have to tell you something that's extremely interesting. So when they wake up out of their ball in the mornings, they like, we say they start up their engines. So then they start cleaning their faces and they start grooming and then they come out and then they yawn. It's like when you hold them like, hey, look at that, you know. And then it's really start up their engine to get ready for what they need to go and do. So that's why sometimes in the past we will wake them up. Now we give them a time and then let them, if we see they start waking up and going, and then we make sure that we put them in the same area. Because I think all these are massive stressors that we in rehab are missing. To let them just be that animal that they're supposed to be. The monitoring is very, very important. So you get people that's on them too much and because they're so scared that they lose them. Look, we lost a few, but with dogs and with the different tracking antennas and so on, we do find them again, and they do this every time. They come back to where they start, and that's why we decided to just do the same thing when we walk them. Is then keep your distance, okay, and let them just walk. I'm almost done, guys. The cold pangolins, the body temperatures as well. If they're in the veld and it rains and it's a bit cold, we take heat pads with, we take towels with, so we dry them, and then they're like, okay, we get used to this, and you put them down. So you can't have lots of people on them. They get used to the smells as well of the people that walking them. Okay, this is just a few things. That's George there on the top. So we have cameras in the night pens, and then George will also look and see where we are. Can I please go out now? I'm done. I'm awake. Let's go, guys. Let's go. So you can see that there's anxiety. Some of us the same. We get like hungry, angry. They as well. You know, like then they go quack, 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 quack. And then it's let's go, guys. And that's a period where you don't want to have them in a vehicle, and now you need to drive out, and now you need to put them in the veld. So better for them to then in rehab try and be in that area and then just put them out there. Because if you and you see the blue and the red lights, you must see that at night. It's the most funniest thing. I have to quickly just tell you this. So we also released rhinos, orphaned rhinos there. So it's quite impressive if you walk with the pangolins and the light goes blue, red, it looks like police. And then the next moment there's a massive rhino, and then you blue, red, and go to another area. So it's quite fun. What you see, what they do as well as at night. It's quite different. It's quite interesting. So sometimes even the ground pangolins will climb up in the trees when you found these old ant nests in the trees. And that's just a summary of. It's just beautiful for me to see it like this. And like I say, it's a rehab of another animal, but this is a complete different animal. It is not Train Your Dragon. It's more than Train Your Dragon, really. So the pangolin rehabilitation conservation requires long-term dedication and expertise, like people that you're going to meet here. And aim to release healthy pangolins. We released one, and we thought she was doing well, and she completely crushed because of the energy in, energy out. The male found her, and I thought it's a good idea. But it looks like he was actually bullying her, and she couldn't get away. So all these things are we need to monitor that after the release as well. And this is the important thing, is treat the animal, not the people or the paper. That is just following. So we will sometimes, with tulip or violet or curvy or blossom or whoever, we will see one thing. And then the other animal will be different. So just remember that there's parameters and key indicators. That's very important. If you miss that, you're most probably going to lose the species. So thank you.
I'll put yours up now. So.
Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you to Drew for the introduction to the session, and thank you to all of you guys for the work you're doing. If I can just give a hand to you guys, because you guys are doing such amazing work. We've spoken about the threats to pangolins, and we've spoken about the rehab of pangolins. So what happens next? This is where our reserve, Sabi Sands, comes in. So just to give you a bit of a background and add to what the others have said, we've had a very healthy pangolin population in our reserve. Unfortunately, over the last few years, the poaching crisis has gotten. Oh, sorry, I think I skipped. Where's there? Sorry, that's the poaching problem. It's gotten much worse over the last few years, as you can see. We've got an external investigations team, which they conduct intelligence operations and things. So as you can see by the stats, it's been getting progressively more and more over the last few years. As you can see there, this is only in the Lowveld that we have these numbers, but basically in 2021, a pangolin was selling for 50,000 Rand. And then in 2022, this went up to about 200,000 Rand. Some have even sold this year for about 400,000 Rand. So the increase of between the 1 year to the next 400% and then another 100% is just, it's crazy to think that, what is the reasoning for this? Could it be because the number of rhinos are less? Is it just the higher demand of pangolin scales? We're still trying to figure all of that out. Then on our fence stats, so this is our population of the reserve. Very healthy population. We've seen many many pangolins along our fence line. But obviously that becomes a big risk to the animals, that because of the high voltage of our fence line, they roll up to protect themselves, right? So they roll up and they roll around the fence wire, and they keep getting shocked, and they keep thinking that, they need to stay in this ball, but then it just kind of creates this cycle of continuous shocking. And that's what we want to try and avoid. And obviously, if they go out our fence line, we've got no way of knowing, we've got no way of finding them. We don't know where they go. They probably get picked up outside. So how do we move forward with our healthy population? To add to the stats that Petronel and them were giving, you can see from 2020 to 2023, the number of pangolins that have been recovered, especially in the illegal wildlife trade, it's increased a lot. And obviously, the more we're learning about these pangolins, the more we realize about the threat against them. And you can see the condition of the pangolins that have been recovered has gotten progressively worse as well over the last few years. And Petronel mentioned it as well, where they are getting kept and hidden. The poachers are also adapting their ways and means. So the environments that they're being kept in cages, in old toilets, in car engines, and getting burnt. So the conditions of the pangolins have really gotten worse. So that's why the rehabilitation is so important. So basically, this leads me to, we are responsible for the protection of the pangolin. We form the part of the western boundary of the Greater Kruger area. So how are we going to protect them? So we have a 24/7 control room, 24 hour a day, control room 7 days a week. And if a pangolin does go into the fence, it will send off a fence alarm. Our control room will then take that to our rangers. So the closest person will then respond, go and have a look at what the fence alarm was for. And then they will, if it is a pangolin, they'll assess the pangolin for any health issues. If it is displaying injuries due to electrocution, we'll contact the vets and get them out. If the pangolin is displaying healthy behavior, then we will release them away from the fence line. So this is, we sent all our section rangers for training, specific workshops so that they know what to look for in, specific injuries and how they should walk and how they shouldn't be walking. So going to how we went into it. So in 2022, we had a lot of problems with lions, trying to get out the fence line, in our drainages and all of that. And obviously, like you saw, we had 24 pangolins on our fence line in 2022. Obviously, we don't know if it's the same pangolin that just keeps coming back. But, this is all part of our project and how we've initiated it. And so we put up 2 types of fences to test and to see which one is going to be more sustainable. The one is just basically an extra strand on our additional apron. And the other is an additional fence line, basically, at the bottom of our fence. So we've basically tested this with tortoises and with pangolins if we found them. So I know it's ethically not necessarily correct, but how else are we going to test this fence? So we've taken them to each of these fences to see how they react. And basically, we found that the additional fence section was best and most sustainable for the pangolins. WCP, they gave us a generous donation towards this, and that was really what just sparked the project within the reserve. And because it was kind of lions and pangolins, we dubbed the fence a pangolin fence. So that's just our name for our little fence line over there. But I mean, the other advantages that we have there is it's keeping the lions in, it's keeping them out of our communities, to avoid, the cattle that are along our boundaries. The lions, that's their wealth, right? That's their livelihoods. And so it's preventing that from happening. But not only that, it's also for other species like tortoises, the smaller things that, it will stop them from going into that electrified fence. And also it's an extra deterrent for poachers. So, it's just that extra measure that they need to get through if they want to get into the reserve. This is just a video of our fence line. So now that we have this fence, so what are we planning to do with it? What is our plan? So you'll see how the fence goes along the bottom. It will hit that top electrified wire, and instead of wrapping around it, it will just fall back down and wrap on the floor. So the risk to electrocution is much, much lower. And as far as I know, we are the only one that has actually done this fence so far. We've had quite a few queries on, how we've tested it, why it's working. So we're really excited to get this going. So that, there's our team busy installing the fence there. So we've done quite a few kilometers. With the WCP donation, we managed to get 8 kilometers of fence materials. And we've got another 8-kilometer donation in as well. So like I said, once we've got this fence, so what do we do now? So after the processes of the recovering them from the illegal wildlife trade and rehabilitating them and treating them, where do we go from here? In our province, Mpumalanga, where Sabi Sands is, we only have one release site, which is Loskop Dam. And they are obviously, because there's been so many pangolins over the last few years, it's quite saturated. They don't really have a lot of space left over for any more pangolin releases. So we've worked with our MTPA, it's our Mpumalanga Tourism and Parks Agency, and they've approved us to be a release site as well. So we're obviously preparing our fence line for this, and basically we're going to be working with Petronel and them, and Umoya is another rehab center, the vets. Conserve Earth is also helping us with the funding. They've hosted golf days, and they've been amazing. Inyati is also, it's one of our lodges within the reserve. They've provided a generous donation. So it's all of these companies and entities coming together to rewild these animals and to try and protect their population and conserve their population and grow it. So what our goals are for the project, like I said, protect and grow the population, but then we'll also make use of the tracking devices. So we'll make use of satellite trackers as well as LoRa trackers. So we've got a very good LoRa network in our reserve, and monitoring and research. Just need to learn more about these animals and learn how will they interact with the wild animals. So all of that is part of our goals and how we want to progress in future. But yeah, I just want to again say thank you to the partners and everyone who's helped us initiate this project. We're really excited, and we're really hoping within the next week or two to get our first pangolin release on the reserve. So yeah, that's all from me. Thank you.
We were originally scheduled to have a bit of a discussion, but I think we've only got about 5 minutes for questions. So I think we'll just turn it over to the audience if there's any questions. There aren't any, then maybe I can ask the question. Yeah. I don't know.
The fence line, how high is it?
How high is the fence line?
So the fence line is approximately, it's between 70 and 80 centimeters high.
Above ground.
Yes, above ground.
Any other questions?
I don't know. What factors do you consider when you choose a release site, especially for the confiscated pangolins?
I think it's important to also know where that animal is coming from. But sometimes we don't know. And then it's a lot to do with the safety. So can that animal be protected after release and also be monitored to see if that animal is doing well? So I think that's very good indicators if we decide on release site. It's also a legal consideration. So the CITES and the people will also make decisions around this. So there's an African Pangolin Working Group in South Africa that also does help with these decisions.
Yeah, and I think just from our side, it's important to note that we've got a dedicated pangolin monitor that will take care of the pangolin as well as our security units. That pangolin monitor will have someone following with release them, and if there's enough of what they need.
Can I make a comment? I think that when they do their arrest, the investigation, one of the things shouldn't be, one of the most important things is where the animal comes from. So that can determine that it goes back to that habitat. because I think a lot of failures are based on taking animals out of the Kalahari and putting it into law school, which is cold, winters, totally different. And I think the police, whoever the investigating authorities, they should spend the effort to interrogate the person that they've arrested to find out where did it come from. And that should determine where that animal goes to. And I'm just saying, from a little bit of involvement with Petronel, it's you're getting animals from the Kalahari being released in cold areas. It doesn't make sense.
So there's an interesting statistic, showing that the questions you're asking to investigators, if you ask them within the first 10 minutes after they were arrested, they're more likely to give information.
Yeah.
Anything beyond that, they're reluctant. So it's important to get that information as soon as possible.
So what we do is when we definitely arrest the guys, a lot of that information comes into EarthRanger. A lot of that is captured within the questions and what is asked, where it is. Especially when it comes to pangos, it's one of the main things that we've trained the units on to make sure that exactly like you said, is to understand where they're coming from so that where we can release them is the same type of environment or is the same place, depending obviously on protection and availability of
Any other questions? Yeah.
What is the survival rate of the rehabilitated pangolins, and how has that changed since you kind of learned more throughout the process?
It's different in different areas, but unfortunately, we felt lately it's not higher as 17 to 20% of what's been confiscated because they're so delicate. And that's why I think a lot of us needs to talk more, needs to know where they're coming more. So please, if you can.
Yeah, so for us, we saw quite a decline in the numbers, I think around like when they confiscated them and they were in very bad condition. And when they were even trying to transport them to the court, pangolins under stress would die because the judges wanted to see the pangolin in person. So we came alongside the courtroom and said, listen, we need to come up with a different plan. Like even if we take a video and then like 70%, especially truckers. But that's within the last year, so that's like very recent.
Exactly. I think that transport, the handling, that needs to be cut short, much shorter.
Yeah.
The African Pangolin Working Group, and I stand to correction again if there's anybody from that, just with me. I think their statistic is that they went from 20% to 8% in the last 10 to 10 years, which I think is pretty incredible.
Any questions?
Hi, so I'm from the Pangolin project in Kenya. The challenge we're having, we are not a rehabilitation project at all. We barely know what we're doing when we get pangolins from poachers, but the vets we haven't gotten any sort of training on what to do. They do not know what is normal.
Lots of confiscations of animals and scales, and I was just wondering if there's any, in the working group, if there's any similar work going on in any of the Central African countries.
Loads.
Yeah.
More than ever, and across various topics, whether using genetics to trace where those scales come from, or what kind of weight of scales equates to what number of pangolins is. Yeah. Is a very, very key part of that, whether it's drawing comics, writing kids' books, visiting schools. It's just, yeah, there are a lot of initiatives out there.
Yeah, so we have like a Rhino cinema, basically, that we host amongst our communities and the schools and things like that. So with this project being initiated, we'll probably do something similar for pangolin. So basically just an extension of that, that's of the Sabi Sand Rhino seminar, and just kind of grow to other species, because it's
to the extent of like, what is your motivation around this trade? So like, why has it jumped from 50,000 to 400,000? What's actually happening on the ground? And then using that to then influence the educational side in the communities, using the resources that they have. But obviously, they're not all connected to TVs or, so trying to get into like either books or to radio to create that like mass exposure.
And then it sits basically like the scales on top of the animal. You know. So sometimes it does break off. Like the scale break and then it comes off and so on. So that's why the monitoring is so important.
if I can I can just add to that, I think the whole process is intrusive. At this stage, that's the only way we know how to monitor them and to make sure they are improving in condition. So at this stage, we don't really have a choice but to be that intrusive entity in their lives.
So do not underestimate that you have to work around all your other technology. You might be following someone with a radio to the other side of the reserve. So these are quite important things that you need to train your team to be able to follow these animals as well. So yeah, there's a field, and I'm sure Sammy's sitting here with me, and the technology. We found interesting thing on the track cams. And then I spoke to other people that's doing in this three-quart area as well. I said, how do you see the pangolins in the trap count? And he said to me, very difficult. So this is all very new. So we found some got little meerkats, what mongooses, and all sorts of interesting things. So there must also be a specific setting, a specific. You almost need to know where that animals are walking to be able to find them. So this is really interesting that if you look at how we're going to track them, it is not as easy. We train a dog, Shoko, he's brilliant. But then he needs to just indicate, he can't go up to the pangolin. It's a whole new world.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up so everybody can take the coffee break. Just want to thank the speakers. This was really great. And thank you all for coming and for your attention. So.